Hi, this is Christopher Allen. I'm the product manager for ZebraZapps, and this is the summary version of Webinar 2 in ZebraZapps Getting Started Training Series, where we're just going to run through quickly each one of the steps that we did in the webinar. And the summary is meant for you to play through, pause, replay, start and stop over as you're building along. It's also a supplement to the learner's guide that was distributed when you signed up for the webinar series. So just a quick agenda. We're going to work on inserting a background image and specifically working with master pages in ZebraZapps. We'll create a few events. And then we'll start building some interactivity. We'll get into the ins and outs of ZebraZapps message centers and how to create some of our first wired interactions. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at marketing@alleni.com or refer to your learner's guide. Let's get started. Okay, the first step is to log into your account. I'm going to use my Facebook login to jump in to ZebraZapps here. And after logging in, if you've been a participant in the webinar series, you should have some projects that were sent to you. And right after logging in, there should be a yellow button in the upper left-hand corner to receive projects. I'll run you through the step on how to accept a project, and then we'll open and edit from the beginning point. So here on the receive project screen, you can also get to it by clicking the account tab and also clicking on the receive link down here at the bottom. You'll notice that the presenter account has sent me 4 projects. We want to start working on W2 phone start. It's essentially the webinar 2 starting point, and we'll say accept. You'll have to confirm this. Take a second to copy that project, place it into your account. And now when we jump back to the My Stuff tab, you'll notice that W2 Phone Start is the first project listed in my Projects list here at the very top. We can click right here to open it, or of course click here, Edit. Both will open the editor. I'll use the short link here in the upper left-hand corner. So the project that was sent to us has a few things in it. It's got an extra event in it, as well as all of the assets needed for the course are uploaded already and inside the resource library. If you're collaborating or working with other people, it's a really nice way to share projects and assets so that someone else can continue working where you have left off. The first thing that we might want to do, now that the project is open, is give it a new name. We, of course, can go to the project drop-down menu, select Save As, and here I might just put my name on at the end and say OK. By doing a Save As, we're essentially wiping the project save history, so now I know that any save that happens in the future is work that I've done and not what the original author has done. So to begin work today, I want to start to talk to you about masters and how they can benefit you as you're working along in your project. You'll notice, unlike a blank project, we actually have a slider bar here at the bottom, and the slider bar lets us navigate between events and masters, and it also splits. If you grab the slider down here at the bottom, you can see any 2 events or any 2 masters, any combination, regardless of whether or not they're next to each other linearly. Masters, if you notice, all start with a letter. In this case, we only have one master, Master A, and all events start with a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're ever curious what you're looking at, is it a master or is it an event? Certainly the letters versus numbers will help, as well as masters have a black title bar and events have a gray title bar. Let's jump into Master A and put a background image on. I'll click the pencil to start editing Master A. From your resource library, of course, which is the rectangle, circle, and triangle over on the left-hand side, let's open that up and find the background image JPEG. You notice it hasn't been used yet in this project since it's got a 0 in its usage column. I'll click and drag to drop this asset right here on the screen. Now, if I want to see event flow again, the easiest way to do that is to click the event flow icon in the very upper left-hand corner. You notice the tooltip is go to flow when I roll over it. This returns me back to my original view, and again, now I can scroll through my project or see any master and event side by side. Masters, if you've used any other software tools like PowerPoint or InDesign, you know that masters allow you to create some level of design or interactivity and reuse it across multiple slides or pages. The same concept applies in Zebra. I can create a few things on a master page and apply it to any one of the events that I like. Really simple to do so. Just by sliding across here, if I'd like, what I want to do is look at the very top of the title bar here. And you notice as I mouse over, I'll get a tooltip that says, these are masters, and I have a maximum of 12. Click to show or hide. Well, I can see what my event would look like if I were to apply master A to it simply by rolling over the very first rectangle. Since we only have one master, I only have one of these large rectangles which represents a master. Just by rolling my pointer over, you can see that it applies that background image to this event. And if I click on it, it's going to stick. So if the rectangle is filled black, you know that a master has been applied. And if it's hollow or light gray, you know that that master page is not applied. So very simply, I can go through and on all my events, apply master A. Once you've applied your master, of course, now you have an opportunity from event flow view to see how your project would look and the objects inside it would look. I've noticed that my text here is just a little too dark with this dark background on it, and it's hard to see enough contrast to read what the letters are. I'd like to change the way that my background master looks, but I'd also like to be able to see how that change is going to affect this text that's on the screen. So to make a change, I'm going to double click and actually start editing this event. And you'll notice if you click anywhere on the screen now that you have a master applied, that it gives a tooltip to let you know that the object that you're clicking on is actually in master A. If I click on the text, I get its message center, of course, and I can move it anywhere around because I'm in event number 2. The title bar is key as we're working through this, so pay attention to what it says here at the top. But notice my text was kind of over the buttons and a little hard to read, and we'd like to fix that. So what I can do is go up to the title bar, and you'll notice that there's now a green pencil underneath master A. And its tooltip, of course, says click pencil to edit master. It's going to let me edit the master in context. Simply by clicking that pencil, you'll notice that the title has changed. It says A, master A background. Now if I click anywhere on the screen, I get the message center for the background. And if I click on the text object, I get a pop-up that says the object I'm clicking on is in event number 2. So we get some context, but the nice thing here is that the text has stayed in place. So now I can make changes to this background image. I'll zoom in here just a little bit. And I'm going to blur the image just a little bit. That'll soften all of these edges. And as you notice, as I start to blur it just a little bit, that the text becomes easier to read. I could also go up to the visibility of my background image and maybe make it just a little bit more transparent. That'll lighten up the screen and increase the contrast. I'll zoom back out. And now I can go back to event flow and see how that change has affected all of my other pages. So it was pretty good on the title page, and it's much easier now to read that text in event number 2. Let's move on to adding a new event. To add a new event, we need to go up again to the event title bar. And you'll notice on either end of all of these events, there's a plus button. And of course, the tooltip is being really helpful in letting us know that by clicking it, I can either add an event before this event or after this event. And of course, it's talking about event number 2 because that's the title bar. So we can add an event here in between number 1 and number 2, creating a new number 2. The credits moves to the end, and our first menu page stays where it was. Another neat thing about using the plus button on either side of an event is it also will maintain whatever events you have applied to that event. So in this case, we're getting that background already applied for free. Double click the event to go in and start editing it, and we're going to add a title and a subtitle and maybe a little bit of contrast. So I'm going to make sure I've got my toolbox open, and let's just simply start by adding in a rectangle. We'd like to have our title and subtitle off to the left so we have most of our stage to work with for creating interactivity. So clicking and dragging to create my rectangle, I notice that my colors maybe here don't contrast enough, so I will go again to the message center and to appearance. I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can see this, and let's click on the fill color chip for the rectangle, and we can make maybe a bright orange gradient. And of course, to select a color using that color picker, simply choose the chip at the bottom and then drag your cursor anywhere over the color gradient here at the bottom. You can also, of course, use our hex color values or create transparency inside any one of the gradients by entering in text inside those two text boxes. So just spend a moment here to play around with how the color picker works and get something that looks nice to you. I'll say OK and zoom out just a little bit. Now let's add the title to our course as well as the subtitle for this event. I'll grab a text object here and we'll just start here at the top. We're going to reposition this text over that orange rectangle that we just created. I'll go in and type in my title. And of course we want to style that, and you remember that from Webinar 1. Here I might go to the inspector to make these changes just because it's convenient for me. And I'll pull that a little wider. And now what we want to do is rotate it and place it over here to the left. So of course I can use my rotation handle to make that happen, and if I hold down the shift key, it'll snap there to perfectly vertical. And we need one more text object here, and this will be our subtitle. We might make this text white so that it offsets just a little bit from the title of our project. Feel free to pause the video and spend a little time to make this look just the way you'd like it. You can add a drop shadow or play around with the fonts just a little bit. Totally up to you. All right, the first interaction that we're going to create is a rollover so that the student can mouse over different parts of his cell phone and learn more about what that feature of the phone does. We're going to start by bringing in a couple assets from the library again. I'd like you to go and find, there's an easy front view and an easy side view. They're labeled Easy S and Easy F. So go ahead and open up the resource library simply by clicking on the rectangle, circle, and triangle. Now you should see all the assets that were imported to the project. Grab Easy F first. We can just go ahead and drop that here on the screen. You notice it's way too big. We can go ahead and use our zoom percentage to bring that down just a little bit. Can find maybe what size we want to use. At 40% looks pretty good. And I'll bring in the easy side view. Again, that's also way too big. But now that I know that 40 is about the right percentage, let's go ahead and click and type to drop that also in. And maybe we need a title here at the top to let us know what phone model this is. And this is the Easy Phone 112. And of course that too can be styled any way you'd like. And bring up the font size and make it bold. Okay, the first interaction that we're going to create is a rollover, so that when the student rolls over here the display, that we have a little pop-up that comes up to the side to let us know that indeed we are pointing at the display. So I'm going to go to my toolbox. I'll close the resource library so it's out of our way, and I will grab a rectangle. I'm going to click and drag right over the top. This is where our display is. This is the rollover area. And let's change its look and feel so that we can maybe leave the rectangle up all the time, but it doesn't distract too much from the look of the phone. So here I'm going to give it a line weight simply by using the slider over here. We can also zoom in a little bit. We could use the message center too. So we'll give it a line weight of 2, and then I'm going to drop the fill opacity quite a bit. I want to be able to actually still see the phone even though I've got some sort of highlight. Now once I've got that fill color down, I realize that black's maybe not a very good highlight color, and I could choose the orange. Now I could go back to picking a color here, but if I wanted to match a color that's already on the screen, simply by dragging my pointer over any of the other objects is going to allow me to pick up on the exact orange that I want to use. So we'll choose that orange, and now we'll maybe make the line weight just a little bit thicker. So I've left our fill opacity down here at 5. Anything above 0 is great. You still want to be able to see through it. The second thing that we need to do is now create some text, something that when the student mouses over this area will be displayed on the screen. So we'll go back to our toolbox, choose the T for just display text, and we might type something in. Just let's call this phone display. Awesome. Now we only want this text to be visible when the pointer or the cursor is actually over this rectangle here. And the way that you do that is by wiring inside ZebraZapps. Let me call your attention back to the message center here and the 2 other categories that we've really yet to take a look at: ins and outs. So first select the rectangle and go ahead and click its outs. You notice that there are 3 categories that are now visible: point and click, drag and drop, and collision. I like to think of outs as anything that the student might do to any of the objects that are on the screen. So let's look at point and click. Now we have a whole bunch of behaviors that they might do to this particular object. They can make a full mouse click where their mouse button comes down, their mouse button comes up. It's this very first one. An action might trigger something on the screen when their mouse button is only down, and then a new action when their mouse button comes up. We also down here at the bottom have when my pointer is over the object and when my pointer is no longer over the object. So these 2 seem pretty important to us for creating a rollover. We want to have something happen when my mouse is over the object, and we want to have something else happen when my mouse is no longer over the object. In particular, we want to change whether or not this piece of text is visible. Now I'm going to click on the text that we placed on the screen, and this time I'm going to open up the ins. I like to think of ins as tricks that this object can do, things it can do, behaviors it can do. In fact, we've even got a category called do. We also have another one called display. And here you can see that the text object can show itself, hide itself, or change its layering with regards to any other object that's already on the screen. So what we want to have happen, and if I shift click so that both my rectangle and my text are visible, kind of mentally draw a picture here. When my pointer is over the rectangle, I want to show the text object, and when my pointer is no longer over the rectangle, I want to hide it. So here's where we do our very first wiring in ZebraZapps. A couple things that I want to call your attention to. To create a wire, you need to click and drag with your mouse over what we call ports. They're these little triangles here that are at the side of the message center. So if I click and drag, holding my mouse button down, I get an orange wire. And this orange wire really says, when the pointer is over this object, if I bring it up over the message center here for text, I want to show the text object. And when my mouse is no longer over the rectangle, I want to hide it. Again, I'm going to click and drag, just bring my mouse button all the way up to the top and let go right here near the edge. That's it. There's no coding, no syntax, nothing that you're typing on the screen. You're doing everything visually. I'm going to go ahead and hit the undo key. I'm going to do that a couple of times. All the wires are gone. I'll do this step one more time. I'm going to click and drag right from the port. Creates a wire. I'm going to bring that up to the message center for the text object, and under display and show, let go. You notice that when my pointer is over any one of these ribbons, the ribbons highlights light gray. That also lets me know that when my wire is over one of these ribbons, I can just simply let go, and that's going to make the connection. Couple ways that you can undo a wire that you've created. You can, of course, hit the Z key to completely undo anything that you've created. Another way is simply just by mousing over the wire. And you'll notice that the wire gets a little bit thick when my pointer is right over it. It lets me know that if I just click and let go, the wire will be deleted. I can also rewire. So if I had connected pointer over to hide, and I really wanted it to show, I could bring my pointer close to the edge, but not quite right on this port over here. Wait for the wire to get thick, hold my mouse button down, that clips it from one end, and then reattach it to show. I'll do this a couple of times. Now, I had made sure that both of the message centers were visible at the same time. It makes wiring just a little bit easier, especially when you're beginning to practice. But the message center for both objects don't have to be on the screen right away. So if I only had the message center showing for the rectangle, I could go down here to pointer over, click and drag to create a wire, and I could bring that wire all the way up to the text object. And by doing so, it's going to make the message center for the text object become visible. Just by mousing over some of these things, now I can get down to show, and again over to hide. Just as simple as that. So I invite you to take a few seconds here, pause the video, and create a couple of wires, delete a couple of wires. Try making these connections over and over. Again, make sure that when you're creating the wire that you're starting from the port here on the side of the message center, and that you're letting go over the ribbon that you intend. And feel free to make a few mistakes, hit the undo key, try this over and over. This is a key gesture inside Zebra, and you'll be doing it a lot. Okay, I hope you've taken the time to practice creating a few wires. Now I'm very curious to see the wiring in action. So let's zoom out just a little bit, especially if you have zoomed in. Just using the minus key on my keyboard to pull me out just a little bit. Now I want to run my project, and I want to call your attention to several different run controls in Zebra. On the title bar, of course, we've used this from EventFlow to edit this event. Just to the right in the title bar, there's a play, or a run from this event forward, and a run resume. These are really handy buttons if you're doing a little bit of editing, testing, doing a little bit of editing, testing, especially just with one event. The other buttons for running and editing are in the upper left-hand corner, and these really talk about your project as a whole. So think of the ones here that are on the title bar as just pertaining to this event, and the ones that are up here in the upper left about your entire project. So if I were to run just this event, I'd want to click this play button here. Now you notice that there's a little bit of a problem with our project already, and that is that the text is still visible on the screen. But if you roll over with your mouse and then you roll out, your text should disappear. And when you roll back over, your text reappears. I can hit edit here. That'll pause my project just as it is and let me start editing. And you'll notice that when it paused, my text disappeared because it was no longer visible on the screen because I had done the rollover and rollout several times. If I'd like to return my project to the exact same state it was before I started running anything, I need to hit the Edit Reset button in the upper left-hand corner. This resets all of the values for all of the objects across this particular project. And you notice my text becomes visible again. We really want to solve the problem of when I start running that the text is not visible. So it has a beginning state of invisible when I start running. And the easiest way to do that is to look inside the message center here under Properties and Visibility. I'll zoom in again using the plus button on my keyboard. There are 5 different ribbons. Is this text object currently visible? Does it have any transparency? The third one down is Hide on Run. And Hide on Run says, I want it to be visible while I'm in edit mode, but when I start running my project, I no longer want this text object to be visible. So I can just simply turn that to true by clicking on the T. We'll zoom out just a little bit, and we'll run this project one more time. Notice that when I hit the run, the text becomes invisible even though it was visible just a moment ago, and now on rollover and rollout, that behaves appropriately. I can hit Edit Reset, or I can hit Edit here. Maybe just hit Edit Reset in the upper left-hand corner, and you notice that text becomes visible again, making it really easy for me to edit it. Fantastic. I hope you've had an opportunity now to run your project a couple times, see how Hide on Run works, and make sure that your pointer over and pointer out are working well together. The next part of our project, here if I'll click off and hide our message centers, is to create a few more of these rollovers. So one for the display and for the send button and the end button and some of the other buttons here on the phone. And as you start working in Zebra, you'll notice that it's really important to label your message centers, especially if you're going to set this work aside for a couple days or share it with another author. It's nice to have labels on these that are somewhat descriptive so that they understand a bit more how your project is supposed to work. So it's nice to maybe start with something like, rollover display and rollover display text. Just a little bit of a description so that the next time that I come into my project I realize, well, this needs to be visible, and this then interacts with my display rollover. So take a few minutes just to go ahead and select the text here at the top of your message centers and put in a label. All right, I hope you have enjoyed creating the first rollover. Your next task is to create 4 more. And I've gone ahead and created just a few more to give you a template to work from. So now I have one for the phone's display, for its power button, for its send button, for its volume controls, and for its headphone jack. So using the same process that we have just completed, feel free to roll the video back and go over those steps one more time. I'd like you to create 4 more for the Easy Phone. And of course, if you're continuing to work on Webinar 2 and all of the homework, you know that there are a couple more models for you to complete. I hope you've enjoyed this summary and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.